Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Fitter and Faster Coaches Corner. I'm your host, as always, Mike Murray. Today, I am thrilled to have what I am going to guess is the most prepared guest with the most extensive notes of anyone we've had on Coaches Corner this year. A coach that needs no introduction, has been seminally involved in multiple areas of USA Swimming governance, the American Swim Coaches Association, and she is a business owner with her team, Peak in Florida. Coach Kathleen Prindle, how are you today?
I am fine. Thank you for having me. It's actually packed, but there is an awesome team called Peak out west run by Abby Lou. So shout out to Peak.
Yes, that is correct. And
Yes.
and Abby Lou has the best shoe game in the entire coaching business.
Yeah, I follow her shoe game on social media and I think it's amazing. And I don't know how, I thought I had a lot of shoes, but she has a lot of shoes. I don't know how she
She
finds
does.
time to wear them all, but it's a pretty impressive. Me and my I don't know, my Rokus and my what are they called? Hokas and my Nikes. That's about the end of my shoe game. So you should have Abby on here and talk about shoes is actually
She
what you
is
should do.
definitely on the list of guests. Her
Yeah.
coaching acumen is unbelievable,
Yes.
and I always love bumping into her when we're at meets. Kathleen, we were so lucky to catch you today between prelims and finals. I know you've gone through several weeks now, back to back to back meets. And
Yep.
today we're here to talk about a really important topic that I think a lot of people are interested in talking about. A lot of coaches are interested in discussing. We hear about coach advocacy all the time in our profession, but we've never really done a deep dive. And you gave me this beautiful idea in pre-production called What Are We Doing Now? What are we going to do next? And what are we going to do later? So I'm hoping that this is the first installment of a series with Kathleen Klein Prindle. And the first question that I want to ask you today is, what does coach advocacy mean to you?
Okay. Well, first of all, again, thank you for having me. And Fitter and Faster this organization has done so much work all the time for our coaches and our athletes, but more specifically in the last year during the COVID-19 pandemic, it's been tremendous, the work that you guys are doing to support coaches. And yes, we're going to talk about now, next, and later. Actually, I hired a new assistant and poor girl started right when the pandemic started. So it's been a little bit of a year for her, but she introduced me to the concept of now, next, and later because I was throwing 1,000 thoughts and 1,000 tasks at her all the time. And she just got a little overwhelmed and we needed a way to break it down. And that's how we do. So now when I'm getting myself overwhelmed with ideas and thoughts, I just say, okay, now, next, and later. So you're asking me about coach advocacy. And that really goes to, why do we need coach advocacy and what is it? So for me, I think there's two parts to that. I think it's advocacy by coaches and advocacy for coaches, because really isn't advocacy at the core of what we do as coaches. So our job is to advocate for our athletes. And that of course means providing a service and providing support and helping them develop to their ends. But our whole sport is really built around advocacy as well. When you think about, I think about at the national level, we've got committees. Think about the work that was done in fighting for our athletes, which is what we do as coaches. 12 and under tech suits, talking about the work that senior development committee does, creating the futures meet, updating the sectionals meet, constantly reevaluating our pipeline. Think about establishing the World 100 as a way to recognize our junior athletes. So there's lots of things that are happening nationally, but I think also when we talk about coach advocacy by the coaches, we're talking about that everyday stuff we do on the pool deck and at practice and at meets. And I was thinking of a recent story right before the pandemic hit, the whole snafu. I was at a meet in Orlando, and of course that was back before everything shut down. So there was the Chasing the Trials cuts, which we all are intimately familiar with and nobody loves. And so we're doing the same, just like everybody else. And we had a situation where there was a a time trial event that went off an hour and 15 minutes early, and my athlete missed it because I didn't want him to be at the pool that early. And I had to go into like tiger mode and advocate for my athlete and really go against really what my personality is and be a bit aggressive and pushy and really get this done. Because why? Because that's my whole job. My whole job is to make sure that my athletes get what they need to be successful. So we're successful when they're successful. At the end of the day, they ended up running a whole time trial just for him. He still didn't get his trials cut. But it was worth the effort. It was worth the effort because that day, that moment reminded me that advocacy isn't just this thing we talk about. I know the other organization you're involved in, and so am I, ASCA, has done a lot of work historically in advocacy, and that sometimes means big things, you know, anti-doping or, you know, pushing back against tech suit rules and things like that. That's important too. But what's also important is our job, the advocacy that we practice every day. So advocacy by coaches. So I would say that as coaches, we're probably all very familiar with that. I think less familiar is the advocacy for coaches. And that's probably what you're getting to and what we probably want to talk about more today. But whose job is that? Is, you know, and today you and I talked in this pre-production, as you call it. I really want this to just kind of be a conversation that's thought-provoking. So I don't want to stand here and give everyone 5 tips for advocacy or whatever. This is an individual conversation that I think we should all be having with ourselves. So whose job is it to be that coach advocate, to advocate for the coaches? We have organizations. Certainly we have a lot of organizations. We've got USA Swimming, we've got ASCA, we've got ISCA, we've got CSCAA, I could go on for, and you know, there's a million. So yes, we have organizations. Is everyone a member of every organization? No. Can everyone afford to be? No. So, okay, that's one way to go. We have mentors, we have mentorship programs, we have individual mentors, you know, okay, that's great. Honestly, you know, my other passion is coach education. So we have coach education programming offered from every direction, especially now, as a lot of things are virtual, there's actually more opportunities for coach education, in my opinion, than there has ever been. But I think it really begins with each one of us on our own pool decks advocating for ourselves. So when you think about coaches and who's advocating for coaches, we're the constants. Let's remember that. I hate to inflate our own egos as coaches, but I'm really proud of what we do. We're the constants in the industry, in the aquatics industry. Okay, we are the coaches, we are the swim instructors, we are the program operators. Athletes come in and go. Even especially in college programs, they're in and out 4 years. So you've got age group programs, maybe you've got kids that are there for 10 years or 12 years. But eventually athletes come and go. And officials are wonderful, amazing supporters, and they are also constants. But I would argue that the large majority of officials, we have our lifers and we need them so much, but most people want to be an official or a stroke and turn judge or whatever at the point where their child is involved. So all this turnover, areas change, teams change, pools change, people change, but who's still there? The coaches. So we're really the only constant in swimming. So that gives us a real opportunity, but also presents a really big challenge, because if we aren't advocating for ourselves, we're just destroying ourselves for really no reason. So I think that, I don't know if that really, that's sort of my beginning answer to your question, but you know, this concept of advocacy by coaches, that's what we do every day by default. But advocacy for coaches is something that we have, we've all dipped into a little bit, but we really need to begin to take our profession seriously as a profession and take matters in our own hands and advocate for ourselves.
I really enjoy, you know, your passion and enthusiasm
I can't help
for
it,
the
I'm sorry.
profession. It's so refreshing to know that there are coach advocates out there who are willing to have these conversations. And I think it's a great segue into the next question, Kathleen, which is, why is it so important for coaches to develop some professional skills? One of the things that you find often with first-year coaches or young coaches They want to be the swim nerd. They know all the energy systems. They know how to write a great workout. They know how to motivate a team. They might know how to motivate parents, but they might lack certain professional skills, communication, marketing, business acumen. I certainly lacked all of those skills when I started. So talk to me a little bit about why it's important for coaches to either learn those skills or have a desire to develop those particular skills.
Okay. Let me, there's a lot there. There's a meaty question there. Thanks. Um, no problem. But let's talk about this now, next, and later thing. So as you're saying, as a new coach, what do I do now? What do I do next? What do I do later? So now, right now, you need to learn to operate effectively within your space. So, I think like Victor Swim Club, for example, is that a board? Do you have a board? Okay, so you've got a board. So you had to learn when you started everything up, you had to learn how to operate. You had to create the board, operate within the board. When I started, I was an assistant various places for a long time, and I started 2 teams. And both times I had different identities as a team. Once was in New Jersey, once was here in Florida. But I had to learn how to operate in my own space and create a team that was an environment that I wanted to be. Did I want a board? Did I not want a board? Am I a for-profit? Am I a not-for-profit? These kind of questions. But you don't have to be a head coach either. There's always somebody that you have to report to, whether it's an athletic director, it's your head coach. If you're working for an NGB, it's probably the USOPC. If you're working within the nonprofit sector, there's like a few more layers of complexity, I would argue, than there is if you're in a for-profit sector, because you really have to live underneath the purview of bylaws and then the rules and regulations, and then understand how a policy manual works and how you have to operate with that. So that's a different soapbox, but I can get on that another day. But this is something right now, what do you do right now? Learn how to operate in your space and learn how to be good in your space. Then next, you can talk about, and we can go into it another time, but really next is where you start to become your own human as a coach. You develop your coaching philosophy, you make your mistakes, you've lived a little, you're a little jaded on some days, and on some days you're a little hopeful. You start to maybe create relationships and start to realize that this swim community is pretty special. It's pretty small in relation to other industries. And it's extremely supportive, even though there are times when it feels a little bit cutthroat. I can assure you that there are moments, but having worked in the fashion industry in New York, that's cutthroat. So swimming is like a bunch of happy puppies compared to that. So that's next. And then later, it's when later for you sort of look outside of yourself and you feel a little more comfortable. Maybe you've been in the sport a while, you've accomplished a few things, you feel proud. Then you start to say, okay, which is kind of maybe where I am. I'm like, I am so proud to be a coach, and I want everyone else to have as much respect for what we do as I have respect for what we do, and the admiration that we have for our colleagues that have accomplished so much over the course of their careers, and just hope to be like them and hope to be as good as them. So we've got the now, next, and later, but really, why do you need these skills? Why bother? Well, obviously the soft skills are something that will take a little longer to develop, but the hard skills, the X's and the O's, that's just a non-negotiable. So there is no excuse as a coach, and I don't care what level you're coaching, wherever you live, that's where you need to be an expert in that area. So, whatever the rule book says, you need to know it. Whatever the rules of the meet are, you need to know it. Who you go to for answering questions, you need to figure that out. And so certainly you can ask, and it is a welcoming community, and figure that out. But I think what's harder to wrap our heads around are these other skills, business and forward thinking and innovation and being resourceful, all that stuff. And I wanted to tell a story. One time I did a talk for ASCA, and I talked about the incline at the Olympic Training Center. I don't know if have you been there? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it's a mile high. For those that don't know, it's a mile high, and I forget the grade. I forget the percentage grade. I probably should have looked it up, but it's steep. Just suffice to say, it's very steep. And, you know, I always do that with my team when we get the opportunity to go to the training center, because it's a mental challenge as much as it is a physical one. And as I'm older and older, it becomes more of a physical challenge every year. I have to talk myself up every step. Come on, one step, one step. But the point is, when you look up at that incline, it is a series of steps going right up to heaven practically. Okay, so that's how I think my old self thought a career should be. So, and in my experience in college and then post college, and moving to New York City and starting in a new industry, and working for a Fortune 500 for-profit corporation, you climb that ladder. So I started as a sales assistant, must have done a good job, got promoted, became a sales executive, must have done a good job, got more volume, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then ended up staying at that company for nearly a decade because I was given an opportunity to advance very regularly. I made more money every time, which was also lovely. But more importantly, I got to grow and expand as a professional because I got opportunities to take that next step. Then long story, you don't need my personal history. Long story short, started a team, loved it. Couldn't get away from, used to run home from the office so I could get to the pool and run my swim team after work at night. And then started to realize that coaching was really what I loved. So going to coaching, I thought, well, I've been successful in business. I'm the, whatever I was, what was I? Director of international sales for a Fortune 500 company representing 17 brands in like 25 countries, and $33 million worth of sales volume, which in the 90s was pretty big. You're a coach? Oh, you're a little thing. You don't know anything, because I'm coming into this probably a decade later than some of my peers. And all of a sudden realizing that when you get to the coaching profession, that analogy of the incline is no longer applicable at all. I mean, there's 100 ways you can build your career as a swim coach. And very few of them are a direct step sort of a thing. And it kind of gelled for me. And you guys have interviewed him as well on your Fitter and Faster, but Doug Ingram did a talk for ASCA like 10 years ago about summiting Everest, and
that's what we had him on. So he did a coach's corner about summiting Everest.
That.
The first time I heard that was at National Select Camp.
Oh, yes. And wasn't it literally like the most powerful thing you ever heard?
Easily.
I mean, for me, it was just so impactful in the way that he could draw parallels between developing himself and developing athletes to summiting Everest, or not summiting Everest. And that, so for me, I kind of started to say, okay, so my career path is not the incline like I thought it was, going to be. It's Everest instead. And then I laughed because I'm like, okay, Kathleen's talking about the incline, which is here, and then Doug's talking about the Everest, which is all the way up here. But it's true. So we have to, first of all, at least for me, I had to reframe. Okay, I want to make a career out of swim coaching. It's not going to be like it was back when I was in New York City. It's not going to be that way now. You don't just work hard, put your head down, put up some good sales volume, and get promoted tomorrow, because no one's going to notice you. And so you have to, again, advocate for yourself. So I think that's, the big takeaway for me is the coaching profession is more like Everest than the incline. And we have to advocate for ourselves. And once we're comfortable advocating for ourselves, we need to, that's now. And then next, we need to be part of groups that advocate. And I'm using the word advocate loosely. Advocate can mean anything. Mentor somebody, help with coach education. It doesn't always mean fight for your right for something. Sometimes you have to fight, but you don't always have to fight. You just need to be part of a larger community. And then, of course, later is hopefully the goal is to have our profession recognized like any other profession. And I don't want to be negative, but I don't necessarily think that we're there yet. There's, do you ever see that meme? That's what I think I do, that one, it's like, okay, what my friends think I do. And it's got some like lifeguard lounging by a pool with some floaty things. And then it's what my parents think I do. And then it has somebody like this, like running the sport of swimming. And then it's what I think I do. And then it has, I think it's Bob Bowman and Michael Phelps standing there like with a million Olympic medals. And it's just funny. But to me, that's like, nobody really knows what we do. We don't even know what we do because we do everything. So how do you begin to define that?
I'm so glad you brought that meme up. But I started thinking about that meme while you were talking. So
Really?
that's same wavelength. Good job.
Yeah, see, we're here.
Yeah, two things I want to say there, because there was a lot there that's important to talk about. And certainly that incline resonates with me. You can see it from the hot tub on the pool deck of the OTC. You can see out that window, and it just looms there. And then you think to yourself, okay, Jack Roach is about 35 years older than me, and he did it like 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah, and he runs it, by the way.
Right, yeah.
I'm like, can I just make one step?
Exactly. But one of the things, Kathleen, that you talk about there is something that happened to me when I was a younger coach. And I remember I had just gotten my first Division I assistant job, and I was standing on the pool deck, and the morning practice ended, and one of the older athletes came to me and said, so Mike, what's like your real job in the middle of the day? And I was
Weren't you insulted? Were you so insulted?
So insulted, because here I'm like pouring every ounce of my life into coaching these kids, and no harm was meant by the question. Oh, you're genuinely interested in what I was doing in between. Fortunately, and this is not the case for a lot of coaches, but fortunately, I was coaching on a club that had some good athletes that allowed me to build some relationships with some great coaches who were my age. So I had that advocacy group. But if you're a coach, in let's say Syracuse, New York, down the road from me, where there aren't many big clubs, and you're coaching and people are asking you that question, and this is what you're most passionate about, that's a really challenging thing to quantify and explain to somebody. So, what are some strategies maybe that you would offer for those coaches?
Well, I was there. So, I basically gave up a career in New York and decided to move to Florida. This was post September 11th. So for those that lived through that, it was definitely life-changing. And I was really mad because I couldn't get a head coach job anywhere, because even though I had started a team of my own in New Jersey, I started an age group team and a master's team, and everyone was like, no, you're not qualified, you need to be an assistant, which is totally fine, because you need to know your role, and I needed to learn how things worked in down here where I live now, because I guess that would be my rambling answer. But I think that the first thing is this whole expression that you learn when you're little: bloom where you are planted. So wherever you are, you can make this work if you love it. I think the first step is also finding out if you love coaching, because coaching is definitely an act of love or a labor of love at the end of the day. But there are ways that you can advocate for yourself wherever you are. And this has nothing to do with, do you coach developmental swimmers? Do you coach older swimmers, younger swimmers, college swimmers? Learn to swim. It doesn't matter. I'm talking about wherever you are, whatever you love to do. I guess that first step is finding out what you love. I always tell people to try to coach every level if you can. And if you're lucky enough to work for a larger club, you can certainly have that opportunity to, work with all the different groups, or at least observe and figure out where your passion is. It's really hard to get excited about something if you're not really into it yourself. So you have to sort of lie to yourself. I used to do that. I'm not very good with little kids, and I used to have to like sit in my car and talk myself up to it. Oh, I love this. No, I don't. I hate this, but I love it. And then I'd go in there with a smile on my face, because you have to make it believable. Anyway, so I think for coaches that are out there, I know what I did. So I came to South Florida thinking that, whatever. And I got bored really quickly, because I was new and I wasn't given a lot of responsibilities in the beginning and whatnot. And I was bored. I'm like, oh, how many times can I teach a flip turn? How many times can I do this? And so I looked for opportunities, and there's so many more opportunities than we realize. And I do want to make sure we have time because I want to talk about the pandemic, but I think it brought opportunities for us anyway. But I think for me, I applied for the Ask a Fellows program, and that was my way. I looked around. I said, okay, I'm coming from a professional corporate environment. I'm used to professional associations. I'm used to trade associations. I'm used to networking events, whatever. And there's not, what do? I look around and I found this Ask a Fellows program. Well, I applied, I didn't get it. The story of my life. And I was frustrated and remained bored and came this close to just quitting coaching. I'm like, I can make more money doing something else. I'm bored to death. What else is out there? This pool deck is becoming stifling. And then I applied once again the next year, and it was an amazing opportunity. If anybody has a chance, I'll do my plug for the Ask a Fellows program, because it changed my life. It changed my career. It changed my focus of interest. It changed a lot of things, but that's one of many mentoring programs, and it's one of many educational programs. So I think, again, if you're going to advocate for yourself, you can't just sit back and just be dissatisfied. You have to take some action. And usually for most, at least for me, that action was trying to, I guess, educate myself a little better, because I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder. Here I am, an assistant coach, and I am, everyone's sort of treating me like it's my first day, but I've been working in a very fast moving industry for a very long time. And so part of me was like, okay, I know more than you think I know. I know, I kept wanting to say that. So I know that's not real specific, but like what Michael, you and I were talking about before, is that one of the benefits of the pandemic is that there is so much information available online. And there's been all sorts of leadership stuff and advocacy stuff that, and you can always, of course, reach out to me directly, but there's resources everywhere. So I didn't want to waste everyone's time with that, because I really want to tackle the bigger questions here. But the answer to that question is, this is not a job. If this is just your job, that's okay. There's a lot of people that are coaching that are part-time, some are even volunteering. But to me, what's the definition? If my reputation and my livelihood and my career advancement opportunities depend on the job that I'm doing with these athletes, whether it's teaching them how to swim, whether it's, getting them their age group developmental time, whether it's getting an Olympic trials cut, whatever it is, my livelihood depends on how good I am at that. If you're in that position, then this is your career. So it might not be your forever career, but it's different. It's not just a job, because once it becomes a career for you, now you've got an obligation. So, or at least I'm speaking for myself, but I'm generalizing for everyone. You have an obligation to yourself, but you have an obligation to those that came before you. And you also have an obligation for the people that are coming next, because you don't want the profession of swim coaching to be like, oh, well, when were the first swimming events in the Olympics? 36? No, 26, something like that. I don't remember. I'm not very good at dates, but when you think about swimming's not that old. We only have room to grow and be better here. But if we don't take our career seriously as our obligation to those that paved the way before us, and then the people that are right behind us coming up next, we owe them too. So I think that is, if you frame that for yourself, if you're standing on the pool deck and you're bored, or you're feeling unfulfilled, or you're feeling like there's got to be more, you need to frame it in a bigger picture and where you fit into the whole industry.
I love it. That's such great perspective and important considerations for coaches to contemplate as they build their career, right? There are all these different, we talked earlier about the stepping stones, but it's a process, and it's a process that can be really challenging. And again, it leads us right into the next question, which is, we see so many talented young coaches, Kathleen, with all of this passion and enthusiasm. And in 5 years, as they start to build their life and they build their relationships, and maybe they're getting married, you might not have any health benefits. You might not have a 401k.
Yeah.
You might not have a number of different things. This is actually a really great conversation I had with Tyler Clary the other day.
Mm.
You know, there are all kinds of what we could classify as normal benefits that would come with a full-time position that swim coaches can't afford or don't have access to. So what are some important steps to kind of build that into your club so that, you know, you have things to offer your staff, to keep your staff, to entice staff to be a part of your team? What are some important business steps in developing the ability to do that?
Well, there's a couple things. So
And I think I'd also like you to talk about how great it is now that we have an opportunity via USA Swimming to do that for our staff.
yes, yes. Okay. So first, when we're talking about this kind of thing, and I always look at the demographic studies that USA Swimming puts out, and it's true. The graph is dramatic. So the percentage, and I wish I thought to print it or look at it before our talk today, but the percentage of coaches drops dramatically. So you start out, and if you look at all registered coaches by age, it drops dramatically. It actually drops a bit by gender too. And so you've got a large percentage of 42% or something like that coaches. And then all of a sudden, by the time you get to a coach who's 65 or 70, it's like 12% or something. And it drops and it drops, it'll drop. And then it plateaus, and then it kind of pops up a little, maybe late 40s. And I anticipate that that's probably people going back to work. And then after, you know, starting a family or moving or whatever. But again, begs the question, is it a real job? I mean, I definitely think it's a real job. You think it's a real job. Does society think it's a real job? We have to do better about preparing our next coaches for this as a profession, and not just something, all right, I'm out of college, I swam, I was pretty good, maybe I'll just coach for a while and see what happens. We got a fair amount of those. Some of those turn into rock star coaches, and some of them just go, that was a good way to waste 3 years. Now I'm going back to grad school. Well, that doesn't help us. Well, why do they want to go back to grad school? Well, they want to make more money, and they want healthcare, and they want to be able to balance building a career with building a life. And that, you know, again, I'm in a philosophical mood now we have this pandemic. So what are we? You know, are we a trade? Is this a trade? Is swim coaching a trade? Or is it an academic pursuit? Like, do we need to start creating 1,000 master's degrees in swim coaching? Is it a blue collar job? Let's talk about it. Is it a white collar job? What do we want it to be? Do we care? I don't know if we care, but I'm just saying these are questions that no one has talked about. No one has bothered to answer when it comes to your job. What's my job? So I think there's things that we're putting in place. And one of the things you asked me to mention is some great work that USA Swimming is doing to try to get some healthcare benefits for coaches, because that's a big detractor when you're, you know, I think you go off your parents' healthcare when you're, I think 26 or maybe 25 in some states, which means you can go work for a club for a year or two. You can, you know, whatever, but then reality hits quickly and you realize you've got to get a job with healthcare. So USA Swimming, and I just want to shout out Alexis Ketto and Joel Schinefeld and their whole crew. They've done an amazing job of actually getting us further than we've ever gotten with regard to providing healthcare for our coaches. I still think that there's a way to go, because the only way that we could get that was to go underneath US Equestrian, which is really great for us, but it reminds us once again how small swimming really is. The roadblock to this has been for years, well, your group is just too small. You've got only 33,000 coaches or something like that. So no, yeah. And so, you know, sounds a lot to us, but that's not a lot. So I think when we're talking about skills, you're saying, what skills do you need? I think more skills are important, and the pandemic has really exposed the need for better skills. But before we even get to the skills, we have to talk about, what do we want to be? Are we a trade? Are we what are we? I don't even know. I'm just doing my best every day, trying to run my team and help my athletes, and and that's all we're all doing every day. But we need to step back and look, I think, sometimes at the bigger picture. And we can take so many lessons from the business world and what they're doing. They're all talking about, having this idea, and I'll just run right into the next topic if you don't mind. Mike's like, I don't even have to ask her questions. She's just, can't shut her off.
You're right on.
I get very excited about these topics. I can't help it.
Well, I knew that, and I have the expert here, so let's do it.
Well, I want to talk about the most important business skill you can have. So you're saying, what skills do coaches need? This is the skill. I'm going to tell you the secret, because I know what the secret is. I'm just not really that good at applying it to myself or executing it myself. You can't ever turn the mirror around and look at yourself, but it is the ability to pivot. We have to be able to pivot, and never more than right now in a pandemic do we need to recognize the importance of pivoting as coaches and taking this moment. And there's so much about it that sucks, but this is still a moment in time that we can take. And I was, I don't know about anyone else. I don't know how anyone else has been coping with the pandemic, but I have done this deep dive into the most depressing topics, like post-apocalyptic living and, the history of the Black Death. And, this is uplifting stuff, really great. I think it makes me feel better about our own situation. We were closed for 192 days, so it was a rough time. but there are so many lessons that we can take from that. For example, and this is going to be a wrong fact, so fake news here, because I can't remember the exact number, but I believe that there have been, in the history of mankind, I think 7 pandemics. And maybe it's 6, maybe it's 8. I can't remember the exact number, but you can count on 2 hands how many pandemics we have experienced. So first of all, we have to, every time that you're scared, depressed, uncertain, not sure what's happening, remember that we are living through history, and not a lot of people have lived through this history, first of all. Then you have to kind of think about what does this mean? If you look at pandemics, and I can't help it that I have, because had nothing else to do for a while, they completely changed society. They changed the economy, they changed society, they changed sport, they changed how leisure, they changed governments. You can, the earliest pandemic that I can think of is the Black Death, and probably because that's like, I was watching a show about it just the other night. There were 3 Black Deaths, but one in the 14th century changed the world. So everything was run by the Roman Empire at that time. Florence was the first city to fall. Florence fell apart in 2 months, and then cut to 3 or 5 years later. Now, Roman Empire didn't even exist anymore. Now we've got France, we've got Germany, we've got England, which is what we know today when we look over at Western Europe. That's because of the pandemic. Think about the Spanish flu. Spanish flu was only 100 years ago, but think about how that changed our whole world. And that's a little muddled because it was mixed in with World War I and everything else. But a lot of young people died from this Spanish flu, which, by the way, originated in the US, not in Spain. So I don't know why they call it the Spanish flu, but that's what happened. What happened as a result of it, though? Okay. Appliances started being invented because women went to the workplace because the men had to go to war, or the men were dying out in the trenches because of the Spanish flu. And so hence we get stovetops, and we get like these ranges, and we get frozen meals, and like all this kind of stuff that they never had before to make it easier. Or then you go even to the SARS, which wasn't a pandemic, but an epidemic. But when was SARS? I don't know, 10 years ago, 15, I don't remember. But where was SARS? SARS was in China. Who is the leading country for e-commerce going into our pandemic now? China. Why? Because the whole country was locked down because of SARS forever. People pivoted. They figured out a way to do business. And now, honestly, they're leading the world in e-commerce even now during our pandemic. So there's things we can learn if we could just calm down and like look at it and figure out, okay, this has caused industries to rise. This has caused things to completely change. And what are we doing now? What could we be doing? They say that crisis is the adrenaline for innovation. I think I read that. And that's kind of what, like, look at us. We're all coaches. What did we do? We sprung into action. Oh, you're shutting our facilities? Oh, we can't swim? Oh, well, I'm going to do backflips. I'm keeping my team. I'm keeping my company. I'm keeping my customers. What do I have to do? What did we do? Our whole industry did something kind of cool, and we banded together, and we're still in it. And we're not done, because last time I checked, which was probably a month ago, I think we still had about 110,000 athletes out of the water, which leads me to believe that's about a third of our athletes, which means that's probably about a third of our clubs that are out of the water. And that's not even including our college programs that are in and out and up and down, and conferences on and conferences off, and who knows what's happening. So we're not done yet. But what do we do now? What do we do next? What do we do later? Well, right now, let's figure out how to not only get through today, but make a lasting impact and innovate, because that's going to make our coaching community stronger, and it's going to make our profession stronger, and things might look different, and we have to be open to that. Our team size, our team makeup, what we learned, some of the business models survived better than others in a pandemic. Some, speaking as a small team, I can say that everyone sort of always laughed at me and, oh, your little team, you'll grow, you'll grow. And I kept saying, no, this is how it's designed. This is how I want it. But sure enough, coming back, reopening after that was probably not as painful for us, I would have to say, because we're used to going two in a lane, one in a lane. That's just how we roll anyway. So that's one small example, but it's an opportunity for teams and coaches individually for their careers to look at, well, things look different now. There's opportunities where there weren't opportunities before. I look at Fitter and Faster and what David started doing. If you remember, he jumped into action and went right into free coaches seminars. Everything was free. It was, let's talk about this. And he was the guy that, at times we would be almost inundated or overloaded, and everybody kept saying, make yourself better, and like, learn how to bake bread. And, meanwhile, I'm like barely surviving every day. But the one thing I would make time for is when David would talk, and he would do these Fitter and Faster. And I don't know if they were coaches corners or what, but talk about some of these bigger issues, like what's really going on here. And I think we can continue that, because what is really going on in this pandemic, regardless of your political views or personal views on it, I think everyone will agree that things have changed and things will continue to change. I would argue that anyone that thinks everything's going to go right back to the way it was, they might be being a little bit naive, because the circumstances have now changed. So again, professional skills, well, we got to be smarter. We got to be business people. We have to seek emerging profit. Like, look where the emerging markets are. Look where your profit pools can be. If you are a new coach, just starting, or a part-time coach or an assistant coach, that doesn't mean you can't think like this either. You need to think like this. Help your team, help your boss, help your head coach, help yourself. Think about opportunities so that we can all keep our jobs and keep our businesses alive. So I think looking for emerging markets, keeping yourself flexible. We certainly learned how important having crisis management plans in place. I didn't have one, I'll be honest. I mean, I had a hurricane disaster plan, but a hurricane and a pandemic are very different things. I had planned for a short-term pool closure of 3 to 4 weeks, not forever and ever. So we need to use these kind of skills are the ones. X's and O's, we got that. Anyone who wants to be a good coach, go be a good coach. Go on a pool deck somewhere, go take an online class. There's ways that we can do that, but where we're lacking as an industry, and myself, I include myself in this, we are not thinking bigger. We need to think broader, and how can we come out of this pandemic thriving? Not just we got through it and we reopened our team. No, how can we thrive? Because this is the moment, in my opinion, the only moment we're going to get to reevaluate coaching as a profession, the time to do that is now, because it's proven by history that after a pandemic, things change drastically. And it's the ones that drive the change that are going to make that change happen. If we sit back passively, well, guess what? In 10 years, we're going to be exactly where we are today, which is a little bit underpaid, a little bit under cared for in terms of healthcare, no less passionate, no less intellectual. When I think about coaches and how innovative they are with their sets and their athletes and their programs. Last night alone, I was on Facebook. I have a list. I made a list in like 15 minutes on Facebook, and I was literally scrolling like we do when we're too tired to like think, there was I forget his name, but thank you to you, because he did all this work about energy zone spreadsheets. And, we've all got our spreadsheets from John Urbanchek and whatever, but he did this interactive thing, and then he did a little tutorial on how to do it. So I spent some time on that. Someone's talking about, I need to start getting ready, gifts for my senior program. Someone else put promoting how to promote your team for free, on like how to market your team. Someone else was throwing out return to play ideas, and like, when you're first back in the water, because some teams are just getting in for the summer. And then we had, I know myself, I signed up for an Ask a Thing on backstroke. So that was in like 12 minutes of time. That we are doing so much as a profession to make ourselves better. So let's finish it. Like, let's do it all the way. And it starts with every single coach. So don't just wait for, Eddie Reese, who's a genius, to make some fast flyers, like do it yourself. Figure out how you can impact on your pool deck. That's my soapbox. Sorry. I kind of got high up on that soapbox there for a minute, but.
Tremendous amount of positive and beneficial information in those last 5 minutes. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about history just listening too. One of the things, Kathleen, that I really admire about you, and you were one of my first phone calls, if you remember, when this whole thing first went down back in March, because you're a person of action. Talk about why action items are great, but execution is critical.
Okay, well, this is one that I struggle with because I get a little analysis paralysis, and I get a little, I take my career seriously. I don't want to make a wrong move or make a bad decision for my team. I think we learned as an industry how to balance getting things done with expediency. So we had to learn. So if you're a person like me who gets paralyzed sometimes, and I want it to be a perfect report or a perfect this, well, it takes forever. And I've missed a deadline now because I'm trying to make it, nobody cares if it's that perfect. It's that 80-20 rule or whatever they talk about. So, but we learned to act and act fast. And it was amazing what people were doing to support their own teams and their own coaches right in their own neighborhood, and to be able to do that quickly. So speed was the key there, versus in the past, maybe it was accuracy, or maybe it was politically correctness, or whatever you call it, but speed became the key. I know in our LSC in South Florida, Florida Gold Coast, I tell this story. I won't cry. I cry all the time when I tell the story, so I'm not going to right now. But we're all sitting there, we're closed. I got a call from a competitor. He's 4 miles down the road from me, and someone I admire very much. He's been coaching for 40 years. He has a team. His facility is way nicer than mine. And he calls me up and goes, "Well, I guess I'm done." And I went, "What do you mean you're done? Like done? What are you talking about done?" He said, "Well, I don't know what to do. I have no pool, therefore I have no team. I think I'm just going to close up and move to Key West and see what happens." And I will not do it now, but I burst into tears, and I thought, this cannot happen. This kind of that this person has devoted his life to swim coaching, started a couple teams, been coaching with some really impressive programs, is doing good work in our community, who just sees no end out, but to just give up. We can't have that, because hopefully we'll never have a pandemic again, but we are going to face things. And for us to be a stronger profession, we have to come together. So what we did was, I said, we're saving our clubs. I don't care. And I don't care what happens. And there were some that said, well, is it a bad thing if some clubs close? Yeah, it's a bad thing. I don't care if you're a crappy club. I don't care if you're a crappy coach. I don't care if you have a crappy pool. You matter. And in this moment, we have to save every single club. So we created grant funding, and it was a wonderful outcome. We had a wonderful committee that worked hard, and every brick wall we were shown, we just knocked it down. But we did it together with the expertise of everybody from the committee. And in the end, it led to a lot of other funding happening. And at the end, there's been about $9 million worth of grant funding provided for clubs to help them through this time, which to me is one of the most amazing things. That's the most amazing example, because that was coaches. That was one coach called another coach. Coach had an idea, went to their LSC. The LSC went, well, let's put a committee together. A committee of coaches worked together, and we made some, what happened. And that is just like step one. That's just one. That's one thing. Think of all the things we could be doing if we did this kind of collaboration all the time. Which brings me to another thing I want to bring up. I have no idea if I'm going overtime or not, but I'm good. He's like, keep talking, I don't have to talk. But we've got these support organizations. They're amazing. The work that they're all doing is amazing. I think we need to find a way to pull them all together and work together, because as our environment changes, look to the past. So there's been an organization to address this and a different one to address that. And someone's got an issue with this, they start an issue, something over here. That's all great. Now that our environment has changed, it doesn't mean that we need to throw any of that away, but it does mean that we need to figure out, well, maybe the old way of, I'm trying to think of the business term for it. I can't remember, but the old way of, we're sort of duplicating work in some areas. And so why can't we figure out a way to communicate and collaborate and have all of these little splinters sort of coming together to really get some action, which is what I saw when we created this grant in our LSC. There were coaches in our committee that normally don't get along, have trouble working together. Everybody banded together because it was the same cause. It was for the greater good of our coaches and therefore our athletes. And we put everything aside and made it happen. And I think that's another lesson that we can, put everything aside and let's make this happen. Let's make coaching a real profession, because I'm proud of it. You're proud of it. I'm pretty sure almost everyone on the pool deck is proud of it. What do we have to do to make the rest of the world see that this is an intelligent, driven, ambitious, motivated, loving and kind group of people? Like, what do we have to do? What does it take?
And again, you do such a great job of finishing your point with lead-ins to the next thing that I'm going to ask. And I would like you, because you have tremendous insight on this, I'd like you to talk about why it's so critical for coaches to participate in the things that they can participate in with USA Swimming, whether it's going to a senior development committee meeting, whether it's taking a role in the LSC at some level. Talk to me about why it's important coaches get involved in aspects of our sport that, might take a lot more time, might require a little bit extra effort.
Yeah, well, thanks for asking that. It does take extra time and it does take extra effort, but is it worth it? I believe, yes, it is. I believe that for many reasons. First of all, if you care about our sport and you intend to be in it for a long time, then you should really want a say in what's going on. And the only way to have a say is to sit at that table. And the only way to sit at that table is to give of yourself, to give of your time. So, there's that old expression, first you get angry and then you get involved. And that's certainly has been maybe the cause for some people getting involved, but that you don't have to be angry to get involved. If you want to say in what we're doing, and right now, swimming is just like every sport, just like every industry on the earth is changing right now, thanks to COVID-19. And, we are charting our path for the future. And, if you care at all about your own career, about your own future, or even if you're only in this for a temporary thing, you get an education too. So I remember I was on senior development for 2 terms, and I remember my first senior development meeting, and I was terrified. And I'm like, what am I possibly going to offer to this table? Well, you start to learn, and you start to figure out and get the big picture, and then you're able to contribute. I remember I didn't speak so much that Dave Ferris, who I think he was the chair at the time, he kept calling me Darla because he said I reminded him of his next door neighbor who watered his plants. So every time he'd call on me, I'd raise my hand and I'd be like, my heart's pounding. I'm like scared to say anything. And I'd go, okay, I'm going to contribute now. And he'd go, okay, Darla. So now it's a joke. Now it's a joke between us. And I'm like, don't call me Darla, I'll kill you. So
you got to appreciate the Long Island, right? I mean,
I know, I love it. I love it. I was never offended. It was just really funny.
All he has to do to me is say, Mike.
And you're like, okay. Yeah. So no, he's awesome. But senior development, and since we're on that topic, I'll put a plug for it. Having a seat at that table and having a say. You can't have a say unless you know what's going on. You can't know what's going on unless you go to the meeting. Well, guess what? There is good that has come out of a pandemic. We now have virtual meetings. In fact, if you go on the USA Swimming website, you can find it. They are having a senior development meeting on April 20th, and it's open. And it doesn't matter. You can go, you don't have to, if you don't feel comfortable on video, don't go on video. Just log into the meeting and listen. And this is kind of cool because before that, you could observe a national committee meeting at any time you wanted if you attended convention. If you didn't attend convention, you didn't really have the opportunity to see those committees in action. And they would meet sometimes virtually, but more often maybe once or twice a year in person. So again, who's got the money or the time to fly all the way to Colorado just to watch a meeting? Well, now we have an opportunity. So it's important, and it's easier now than it ever has been to get involved. And if you're a person like me who's, I might not sound shy right this minute, but I'm actually kind of shy, and it takes me a while. And this is an opportunity to just sit in and listen and just feel the way, feel it out, see if it's something you want to do. You can get involved. It's important that you get involved locally. So I'll say that too. So here I'm talking about national committees, but it's easier to get involved locally, and it'll be more comfortable for you to get involved locally. And it's also your job. So talking about that obligation to those that came before you and those that are coming next, you have to, here I am preaching, telling you what you have to do. But I think that you have to get involved locally. First of all, you're going to learn a lot. Second of all, you're going to feel really good because you're making a contribution in your area. You don't have to be on the board. There's other ways to get involved. If you're not a board person, I like boards. I come from corporate America. I can't help it. I like the board meeting setting, but that's not for everybody. But there are ways you can volunteer at camps. You can volunteer for different initiatives. You can be on a task force. You can help mentor an athlete. There's 100 things you can do locally as well. I think what I see that frustrates me is people that have never given anything locally, and then they want to go and contribute on a national committee. And while I think that's noble, because it certainly takes a lot of time on a national committee, you really need to bloom where you are planted. Once again, you need to live in your own house. You need to exist in your own neighborhood first, and then you can continue on. But that concept of we're all this community and it's a circle and we're giving back and we're taking from those that came before us, but we're leaving something for those that are next. I mean, that's sort of at the foundation of building a long-term profession.
Very well said, and critical for young coaches to understand that too. You can start working with the LSC just by being a zone coach, or helping to set up an LSC select camp. I mean, those are really valuable experiences for young coaches. And then you start to network. And then if you really want to have a say, you got to network. And I think that is so critical. Kathleen, I've kept you now for like an hour and 10 minutes, and I know we're planning to do a series of these. This has been absolutely fantastic. I want to close today and kind of keep people on the hook for the next time that you and I get together to do this, maybe in a month or so. It'll be this was the now episode.
Yeah.
And then we'll get to the next episode and we'll finish off with the later episode. But what are you most excited about with our sport moving forward here as we get into the long course season? Not quite all the way through COVID, but we're getting closer. What are you most excited about for the sport in our country?
Well, I'm excited about the Olympic Games and what that means for all of us. It means hope for everybody. But I think I'm excited. I'll talk about my own LSC as an example. People that know us know that we're Florida Gold Coast, South Florida. It's an LSC that's pretty unique. It's run mostly by coaches there, and that brings a lot of benefits and some downfalls as well. There's a lot of competition in our LSC, and I have seen us work together like we've never worked together before. I've seen people emerge as leaders that you never would have expected before. I've seen people that are current leaders, including myself, that are wonderfully able to step back and sort of pass that reign to somebody else. There's not a lot of infighting like there used to be commonly with teams that compete with each other. It's been really inspirational, and I think that has been because of the pandemic. It came out of necessity, but I think that is something that's going to continue. Much higher communication, much higher collaboration, which is what we need across our industry to make an impact. I'm also looking forward to a real season. So we are fortunate in South Florida to be having a championship season. I recognize that there's so many people that don't have that. And definitely we're all out of practice because we're so tired. We're complaining, oh, we have so many meets. Well, let's not complain about that, please. So I have a meet right now, and we're in our LSC champs right now, senior champs. But the feeling of being able to go back on a pool deck and see humans and see your colleagues that you haven't seen in a year, there have been tears many times, and that's just been great. But now we can train again. So the hope is that if everything continues the way it's going and we are able to keep incrementally opening things, that maybe by the summer champs, we'll have a real season. So we're having our spring champs with no meets leading up to it. No one got the time standards they needed. Nobody had the race experience they needed. But now that that's getting under our belt, I'm really looking forward to maybe having a real season that we can actually plan as coaches instead of reacting to. We can really learn from what's going to happen with our elite athletes in the country and in the world and how they have reacted to 9 months off. So I'm just excited for the continued development of the world of swimming and the world of coaching.
I love it. And I look forward to our next installment. So we gotta look at your calendar and my calendar so we can get to the next phase. That's the next episode.
Next.
Kathleen, thank you so much for your time. This was really wonderful. I knew it was going to be great before we got to it, but so many nuggets in here, and even a little history lesson. And also we found out what a voracious reader you are as well.
Oh, well, yeah, I do like to read, but thank you so much to you and Fitter and Faster, and keep doing what you guys are doing. Just bring in coaches together. It's amazing work that you're doing. So thank you for that.
Thanks so much, Kathleen. I really appreciate it. And we will talk to you soon.